evening, everyone. I am Dr. Kanupriya, associated with the Department of English at Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies. And I welcome you all to the second day at the 7-day International Faculty Development Program on creating and stimulating research-based teaching in higher education, jointly organized by the Department of English at Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies and Cape Comorin Trust. Unlike yesterday, we have two speakers for this session, Dr. Manpreet Arora and Dr. Shalini Kashmiria. I would like to invite Dr. Manpreet Arora for the first session. Dr. Manpreet Arora is Senior Assistant Professor of Management in the School of Commerce and Management Studies, Central University of Himachal Pradesh, Dharamshala, India. With around 20 years of teaching experience, she has varied interest areas. A gold medalist at undergraduate and distinction holder at postgraduate level, she obtained her PhD in International Trade from Himachal Pradesh University, Shimla, India. Her areas of interest include accounting and finance, strategic management, entrepreneurship, qualitative research, case study development, communication skills, and microfinance. She has been guiding research at doctoral level and has worked in the areas of microfinance. As an active seminarian, she has attended more than 100 seminars, conferences, and has visited several universities and colleges to deliver invited talks on finance, strategic management, qualitative research, business communication, interpersonal skills, entrepreneurship, and skill development. She is a motivational speaker and conducts workshops on communication and motivation. Having published more than 25 papers in various journals of national and international repute, including Scopus, WOS, and category journals, Dr. Arora has also worked as content developer of MHRD, EPG Pathshala project, and OERs for IGNOU. She has written 40 book chapters in national as well as international books, handbooks, volumes published with IGI, Taylor, and Francis, etc. With 4 edited books in her credit, she is a persistent researcher in the field of management. She is an active social worker also and is working towards the protecting of the rights of women. I welcome you wholehearted, ma'am. Over to you. We are eagerly waiting for the interactive session from your side, and I request all the participants, whatever queries, suggestions, comments, questions you have, we will take up all the questions once both the sessions are done. Over to you, ma'am.
It was a pleasant surprise, Kanupriya, to see you, and I'm very happy that you are moderating the session. I was not aware that you are part of this FDP, and I'm very, very happy to see you over here.
Thank you, ma'am. Same here.
Okay, so to begin with, I would like to tell everybody that we had a great, time in university when Kanupriya was the research scholar in our university, and she's also a very persistent researcher and very good in her discipline, that's English. And as from the flow of English while she was speaking, we can say that she's having a great command in the language, and I'm very impressed the way she started or initiated the session. So Kanupriya, my blessings to you.
Thank
and
you,
I hope your family is good. So to begin with, I'll thank the organizers to give me an opportunity, as well as Dr. Shelja, to bear my impatient attitude as always, because there can be certain things which while coordinating you have to bear. So she's a very very, very polite and a noble soul. So thanks to all the organizers also. So let me share my screen first. I hope I'm audible clearly because my connection is little weak today.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. I'm sharing my screen.
It's visible, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll not be going into presentation mode. because I want to see the audience also and my PPT also. If I go for the presentation mode, then I'll not be able to see the screen, right? So if I get disconnected, I'll be in a trouble and I'll not be knowing that. I hope it is fine with everybody. So shall we start, Kanupriya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll be talking about the qualitative research today, and those who are connected with higher education, they must be knowing this fact that it is a very, very growing and emerging area, not only in social sciences, but it is used in every kind of discipline these days. No doubt it's a very old thing, but now people have started realizing the importance of qualitative research, its types and various aspects, because after a point of time when humanity saw that the junk which we were producing through use of various softwares and we were just relying on data, we somehow realized that the research or the humane aspect of the research is imbibed in qualitative research. So merging two areas like quantitative as well as qualitative became very indispensable, and in management, in sociology, in commerce, in obviously languages, in other disciplines, medical sciences are totally doing this from from many years. But in various disciplines, especially like social work, management, commerce, sociology, they are using qualitative research as a very important research area or research tools or the research dimensions of this section of research. So what exactly is regarded to be qualitative research, and what are its various dimensions? What are the different types of qualitative research? We'll be discussing about it, though it is very wide thing and will not be able to cover up in 1 hour only. It's a very extensive and wider, its scope is very extensive and very wide. So we have to limit down to certain things only, which a beginner should understand that how it is important in doing the research. So I'll be giving you just snapshots of various aspects of qualitative research, so that if somebody is interested in doing any research in qualitative research, then at least that person should know how to begin with and what are its dimensions. We all understand that research as well as common sense, it is the combination of a perfect blend of something which helps you to understand the various aspects of research which are connected with the world. So simply stating, if I talk about that, if you want to research about reality, what exactly is reality, and you are in search of reality, then obviously you cannot do it by just quantifying something. You have to have understanding of qualitative aspects of the research. So arguably, but not common sense, it involves very, very explicit as well as systematic approach to finding out what various things are surrounding us. Often we carry certain testing, or we have certain preconceptions, which we generally in economics say that we may have certain assumptions to find out that what we want to find out. So anything, the process which is totally dependent upon finding out some reality or finding out certain research question, or maybe checking out something which is into your mind, is very much important, or the base of starting with the qualitative research. Then in general parlance, when you do research, you try to conduct a literature review and you try to create a research design, which ultimately assesses that what kind of research can be done and what research question can be addressed by that particular literature review. While finding out the literature review, you find out certain gaps also. So whatever decisions we make while doing the literature review, we try to include various kinds of data also, various kinds of assumptions also. We try to assume that how we are gonna do that research, how we are gonna collect the data, and how we are gonna invite the participants that are going to become part of the research. So when I talk about data, then generally people think that data is just quantitative thing, and it is in stated in numerical terms only. So when we are talking about data over here, we are not just talking about monetary figures. It can be the part of the qualitative research. It cannot be, it may be, it may not be. But when we are talking about data, then the human experiences are our data. What they feel, what they think about something, what are their narratives, what they disclose, everything can be our data. So do not keep into your mind that data is just something which is stated in the numerical terms only. So for us, data can be so many things, and we will be discussing about it later on also. So when we are doing research in the areas of psychology, sociology, as I told you earlier also, whether it is anthropology or social sciences, ki koi bhi, any field, then you have to, deal with human beings. And it is very difficult that when you are talking about human beings, then you can quantify every aspect of the human being. It is not possible, extremely difficult to quantify every kind of human behavior. We cannot be totally dependent upon numeric terms. So measurable terms are sometimes, not our forte. But when we are not able to measure something, then you have to see that it is affected by the behavior of somebody. When people behave, there can be so many kinds of the attitudes or the behaviors or the experiences or their life instances or anecdotes or anything. If it is culture, then maybe the cultural aspects. Then we are talking about stating a research question, that how much or how often we are going to explore that behavior, or if something happens, what kind of scenario can be there. So probably we are not using at that time quantitative things. At that time you have to rely upon your qualitative aspects also. If a person is doing research about how many people are using pension scheme in an institution or in an organization, then yes, it can be quantified. But whether people are satisfied by the pension scheme or not, it is somewhat the mixture of quantification as well as the qualitative aspect also. If a person is working in the organization, you are giving some salary to that person, then salary can be quantified. But whether he is honest, honesty is somewhat having the mixture of quantification as well as the qualitative dimension. So sometimes only qualitative data or the mixture of the two data is there, and the qualitative research tools or qualitative research methods help us to broaden our understanding of these types of things which generally come into our way while we deal with the social world while dealing with the research. So whenever we are talking about a research question, we involve how people experience something, what are their views, how do they understand about the aspect, how much they are identified about a particular thing, whether they are assessing a particular service in a positive manner or not, whether they are talking about a scheme which is implementable or not. So we are talking about the real life experiences. So real life contexts or the real life experiences are very important in qualitative research. And sometimes there are certain sensitive topics also which require a lot of flexibility. Like religion is a very sensitive topic, or maybe you are talking about the experience or the life struggles of a rape victim. It's a very sensitive topic. Or any female who has been, a part of a certain kind of problem in her home or domestic violence, then how she's feeling distressed about it. It's a very sensitive topic. In all these things, you cannot say that I can quantify the emotion of a female, how bad she feels about her life, or how motivated she feels now, or how she feels to win the world about that. So there can be certain aspects which probably needs to be discussed by qualitative methodologies. So when you are talking about the nature of qualitative research, whatever research we are doing, whether quantitative or qualitative, it must, involve certain kind of explicit, which is auditable, or some disciplined or some systematic approaches to find out certain things. It is not, some people criticize qualitative research also. There is a huge chunk of society which talks against qualitative research also, because they feel this is no kind of research and nothing can be valid when we are talking about the qualitative aspects. And there is a huge chunk of society which accepts that qualitative research is a very important aspect of research. So there can be do's also, there can be don'ts also. The criticism is generally based upon that qualitative research has got subjectivity. So whatever you do, you should have some systematic approach to justify that whatever you are researching is valid in terms of research. So consideration should be given to these common goals. Although there can be differences between qualitative and quantitative research, and which are exaggerated all over the world. And as I was telling you, that people criticize also, and people say in favor of qualitative research also. But the matter of the fact is both are inseparable in various fields. Whenever you are even quantifying the data, certain qualitative aspects have to be considered while arriving at the right type of conclusions or right type of results. So there are certain differences between qualitative and quantitative research, because if people have not studied about qualitative research, they generally do not accept at the very first instance that what is qualitative research and what kind of research it is. There is whole lot of subjectivity involved in it, so we do not consider it to be a appropriate way of research. So the differences are like this. The qualitative research, it is totally focused upon that how people or the groups of people are looking at the reality. For you, the reality can be something different. For me, the reality can be different. So usually there is a difference between how people perceive about social or psychological realities, and these realities can be very, very different for a lot of people. Maybe for some it is same, maybe for others that is different. When we are talking about the quantitative research, we tend to focus on certain ways which describe and understand the reality, but we generally follow certain laws. So there are certain laws, rules, measurements, formulas, maybe the standardized scales or something like that. So quantitative research has got certain laws. Then we are talking about, if qualitative research, then it is very, very complex, because you are talking about real world, and real life and real world both are very, very complex. Human nature is very complex. Even if you say that I know a person from past 40 years, 50 years, but still you cannot know everything about that person. It is so complex. So there can be certain different perspectives about qualitative research, which are usually left while doing the research. But you try to probe, you try to find out those deeper dimensions of qualitative research or the research which generally cannot be quantified, and which are generally ignored by the quantitative research, and they are taken care by qualitative research. When we are talking about the quantitative research, it takes account of complexity by precise defining what is the definition of a particular thing, what is the focus of the interest, what are the techniques which can be used, how they can be discounted, and so on. In the same manner, when you're talking about the quantitative research, then you have to be very much focused upon variables. What are your variables? What can be the various aspects which you have to take care of? You have to make certain assumptions. You have to make certain things constant. And you sometimes manipulate those variables also in order to find out certain values while using certain yes, please. There is Mukta Vedya and Aishwarya Mathur. They are raising hand time and again. So I don't know whether the questions can be taken in between or not, but as Dr. Priya told us, we can take the questions later on. So I hope Mukta ji and Aishwarya ji, it is okay with you, and we can take later on if you have certain query into your mind.
Okay,
So,
ma'am. Okay.
So when we are talking about the qualitative research, then we are generally focusing on experiences. We are talking generally about the things which are experiences of the people, and you are maybe later down using certain softwares. Yes, you heard me right. There are certain softwares which are meant for analyzing the qualitative research data also, and the qualitative data can be our text or the content which can be analyzed by certain softwares which are available. And they help us to find out certain kind of words or dimensions or themes or narratives, which generally the text has taken out to be the most repetitive content, in order to find out that what people in general parlance are thinking about a certain topic or reality. So no doubt the things are there for qualitative research in terms of using softwares also, but it is not necessary that we quantify them. But in kind of a quantitative research, you have to quantify everything. If you are talking about even customer behavior, even you are talking about the emotional intelligence, if you are talking about any kind of digital behavior or digital acceptances, or you are talking about literacy level, or you are talking about financial literacy, everything no doubt is having a qualitative element, and subjectivity is bound to be there, but they have to be quantified. So when you are talking about the qualitative research, sometimes the basic thrust is developing a concept or a theory. Yes, development of concept as well as development of theory is an important aspect of qualitative research, and we generally do qualitative research to not only just finding out reality, but to frame theories, but to frame the concepts, and the conceptual background of particular thing can be found out by doing qualitative research. The ontological aspects, the qualitative dimensions, the various perspectives which we try to find out in qualitative research are the basic outcome of the qualitative research. But in quantitative research, the focus is on cause, effect, experiments. You try to approve or disapprove certain hypotheses, and you try to find out certain values which become the base of your results. So qualitative research is totally concerned with developing certain explanations of a social phenomena. They help us to understand that what social world is in which we live, and what things are encompassing that social world, how the way they are dealt with the social arenas, how people believe or feel about those things. So it is concerned with the social aspects of the world, and you try to seek the answers to certain questions, which can be like why people like behave the way they do, what are their opinions and attitudes, how they were formed, how they were affected by various experiences or certain certain kind of happenings, or certain kinds of incidents which happened in their life, how people are affected by the events, and how do they go about it, how they go about certain aspects which generally they feel, how and why culture or practices have been developed as the way they are. So all these phenomena or questions are generally addressed by the qualitative research. There are certain theories and concepts of qualitative research which I'll not be able to cover today, because it's entirely a different topic. It is quite philosophical in nature, and it requires a lot of time. So I'll not bore you by philosophical things, and I'll just try to tell you that these are theories or certain kinds of aspects which must be known by a researcher if he or she wants to pursue certain research in qualitative research. So there are certain theories like interactionism, phenomenology, and critical theory, or there are so many. I must again repeat my word, there are so many again. So they help us to develop a research question. They will guide the selection of relevant data. We can interpret the data, and you try to, propose certain explanations of certain causes and influences by the help of these theories. The qualitative researchers, they totally rely on these theories, which are drawn from social sciences, obviously, as well as humanities, and it helps them to guide their research process, and it helps them to eliminate their findings. So these theories, they provide a very, very complex as well as conceptual understanding and comprehensive understanding of the things which cannot be quantified. How societies work, how organizations work, why people interact in certain way. These things are are generally covered by them. These are basically the lenses which give you a lens. Every person can have a different lens, different perspective, different narrative of his own experience. So all these complicated problems which are generally part of our society, we try to see through a lens by these qualitative theories or dimensions by which you can look at the different aspects of the data, provide a framework within which you have to conduct your analysis. So there is no other way to understand that what a particular culture is. Instead, you are living that culture, right? If you want to see that what exactly is the behavior of people who are following certain culture, then people have to live in that culture. People have to stay around those people who are following that particular culture. If you're talking about a tribal community which is living in maybe Africa and you want to know about them, okay, you can Google, you can find certain aspects about them, you can get some certain videos or content, but it is not enough. Until and unless you live with them, you eat with them, you try to know their dimensions, try to know their what they exactly feel about things, how do they perspectivize various aspects, what they feel about nature, what they feel about the organic things, why do they do not want to go to various modern cities, why they want to live that lifestyle only. There can be certain dimensions which you can find out by talking to them, by staying with them, by living with them. So these qualitative dimensions you cannot find out in text, you cannot feel them, you can just read them. So these things are very important aspects. Similarly, in medical sciences, doctor nurse interactions on medical wards, how a person is feeling, there can be various aspects of stress, there can be various aspects of mental wellness, there can be various aspects of mental well-being these days after COVID period that people are affected by, that how do they are carrying out their life after their loved ones are lost during pandemic, how they feel about life. It is going to change their life altogether. Maybe the person is earning, maybe the person is doing the job, but maybe deep down inside that person is not feeling all right about the life because of the past incidents which happened during pandemic in his life. So those experiences have got qualitative dimensions, those experiences have got certain deep down aspects which cannot be quantified. And if you want to know about those aspects, nobody is going to tell you very easily until and unless you gain trust of that person. So it is very lengthy process. It's not a shortcut that you went to field, you made a questionnaire, you get strongly agree or not agreed, clicked by these people, you entered the data into the software, and then you find out the result and your hypothesis is accepted or rejected. No, maybe you have to create a friendship or trust building exercise, takes 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. So it's a very, very complicated process, and that's why it has got subjectivity also. One challenge I must try to convince you by doing the qualitative research, which can arise while doing the qualitative research, is sometimes we get emotionally involved in these kinds of researches, which can create a bias. It can enhance the subjectivity level also, from which a person should try to refrain, so that the validity or the reporting of the qualitative research is done in a true and fair manner. But again, it's very complex. If you are dealing with human beings, we are bound to get certain kind of emotional acceptance or emotional attachment with the subject which you are researching, but somehow you need to behave very, very mechanical in order to give a true picture or the fair picture or a very, very right picture of the research, by not get it affected by your personal biases, by your personal feelings, by your personal kind of attachments to the subject. So that's why the qualitative approaches are very important, and qualitative approaches are guiding us to do certain things which can be explicitly or implicitly having the qualitative content. And here the role of researcher or the stages of research and method of data analysis are very important. So when you are talking about the approaches, we can talk about few approaches today, like ethnography. So when we are talking about ethnography, the ethnographic approach to the qualitative research comes from anthropology. And the emphasis of anthropology is basically on finding out the roots of certain cultures, and the emphasis of ethnography is studying the entire culture. So we can never think of talking or knowing about a culture in just quantifying manner, or maybe we cannot measure it properly by using any quantifying technique. We have to follow certain subjective approach, or you have to follow certain approach which is going to underscore the various aspects which are related with the culture, and that can be qualitative research only. So originally, when you talk about the idea of culture, it was tied to ethnicity. It was tied to finding out how people behave or live or eat or interact with each other in a certain different geographical location. I'm just an example is coming into my mind, as I am born and brought up in Himachal only. Generally, people here in Himachal says that after few miles, when you travel in Himachal, the food gets changed, the language gets changed, the way people live gets changed. Few miles only. And when seriously, yes, we talk about these people when they are dealing with other things, or there are marriages or ceremonies, the way they serve the food is different, the way they eat is different, and their language has got certain difference also. So culture is totally focusing on various kinds of aspects which can be lived, which can be felt, which can be part of our life. So originally, the idea of culture is totally associated with ethnicity as well as geographical locations. But as due to globalization, we are having internet, we are having the accessibility of going virtually to any place in the world. We can interact with a person sitting anywhere in the world with the help of social media or internet or other kind of digital modes. So the cultures are now more transmitted from here and there, and there can be certain kind of similarities which are emerging in these cultures, but still the roots of the culture or various aspects of the culture, they remain different. And that is why we can study the culture of a business or a defined group or any kind of a culture by the help of qualitative research. And ethnography is treated to be a very broad area where variety of methods and practitioners have given various methods. Most common ethnographic approach is observing your participants. As I'm telling you again and again, if you want to see about a culture or know about a culture, you have to live that culture, you have to live in that particular area. So the participant observation is an important technique or tool, you can say. As generally people say in parametric test or non-parametric test, which test will be applied? You say T test will be applied, F test will be applied. I'm using ANOVA, I'm using Menkova. So as in qualitative research, if you are doing any ethnographic kind of a study, so then you will have to live that particular thing, and it is known as the most common or important approach of finding the data from the field research, which is used for analysis and deriving certain conclusions for culture. So ethnographer, these people, they become immersed to the culture, they become active participant about the culture, they record extensive field notes. Generally, earlier people used to write down, now people take videos with the permission of the subject. They record audios and then they are transcribed, and the transcribed files can be used in certain softwares also to find out the various thematic issues which are found in those notes. So ethnographers, they generally use these kinds of approaches. There is a grounded theory, again a theoretical base, where there is no limit of what is to be observed. So grounded theory tells us that you should not limit yourself to something while doing the qualitative research, because the certainty of human behavior can never be established. You can never say that I am certain that this person is doing this and he feels like this. There can be certain different dimensions and aspects which you have to look down while doing the research, and you cannot have a very set kind of a framework while doing your research. You have to be very flexible in your approach. And generally, when I teach qualitative research to my students, they ask me, ma'am, what is the ending point? When the qualitative research should end? So when you do ethnographic study, it is your call to decide that when it should end, because complete reporting, complete research, or 100% finding out certain phenomena in qualitative research is not at all possible. It is totally impossible. So what would be your ending point as a researcher? You have to decide that. Another aspect of qualitative research is phenomenology. So phenomenology is totally based upon the philosophical perspectives, and it is based upon the philosophical arenas of a qualitative methodology. Long history of philosophy is there, and anybody from philosophy must be knowing this fact that there are so many disciplines which carry certain basics or certain conceptual backgrounds or theoretical frameworks from philosophy. So it has got a long history in several social science disciplines, including psychology, sociology, as well as social work. And phenomenology is that school of thought which emphasizes on the focus of people's subjective experiences, right? If somebody has felt very bad during COVID, and there are certain ups and downs in somebody's life, then his idea of pandemic is something different. A person who was living lavishly, having a lot of ration at his house, no money problem, and for him it was holidays and he's not going out and enjoying at home, his perspective for pandemic is different. So everybody has got a subjective perception of any experience. Your interpretation of pandemic would be different. My interpretation of pandemic would be different. A person who left his home from Bihar to someplace else in search of his food or family, barefoot, without any train, without any bus, his experiences and narratives would be different. So when you talk about the phenomenology, the phenomenologists, they want to understand how the world appears to others, how my subject, it feels about the world or a particular phenomena. Field research, we are all aware, maybe, I expect so, and I believe so also. Why? Because every kind of research in somehow leads us to field research. It can be talking to somebody who was writing poems in literature, and you are trying to find out what were the old poems. It can be relating with certain anecdotes. It can be related with finding out the attitude of a customer towards a buying behavior of certain products. It can be the company's employees. Shalini ji, kindly mute your mic. Shalini Arnan, I'll request you. Right. So when you are talking about field research, then it is again very, very different, as well as very, very complex for every kind of a researcher. It can be considered a broad approach in both the things, quantitative as well as qualitative. But in qualitative research, I must insist on the fact that you have to rely greatly on field research. When you are talking about qualitative research, you are not just talking about one person's feeling. You have to get down into the field, take the notes, interact with people, discuss their ideas, try to find out how they feel, if you're talking about any aspect of the qualitative research related with the person's attitude towards a particular thing. So the method generally can be the participant observation. It can be extensively talking to them. It can be the group discussions. It can be a case analysis, which is subsequently coded, and it can be analyzed in different ways. Another dimension of qualitative research is grounded theory. So grounded theory is the approach which was originally developed by Glaser and Strauss in 1960s. It is basically depending upon the phenomena of interest, that how people become interested about something. It is not just abstract theorizing. Instead, you have to find out certain theories, certain concepts which have certain roots. Grounded means certain rooted concepts. So sometimes observation, sometimes case studies, sometimes discussions, they can be the tool while you are finding out that how people are rooted in certain things, or how their feelings are rooted into some things. To take an example, there can be wide variety of things which can be done in grounded theory. So it's a very complex iterative process. And the research begins with generally raising a generative question, which generally help us to guide, that is intended to find out certain things. It can be stated, or it can be, confining to a certain aspect also. So you have to gather the data to core certain theoretical concepts. Then you have to find out certain tentative linkages which can be developed between theoretical concepts and the data. So this is basically the early phase of grounded theory, where you as a researcher try to be very open, and it may take months and months to find out that what exactly is your research question. So again, it's a very complicated process. This effort tends to evolve around or finding out certain core strategy which is central to a person's behavior. So there can be certain key analytical strategies which are generally used in qualitative research. As we do coding in certain statistical softwares, we do coding in qualitative research also. It is the process where you categorize your qualitative data so that you can describe your implication and details of these categories. Initially, you can start with open coding, and then you consider the data in minutest details, and then you develop certain initial categories from your data. The data is basically content over here. Later on, you can move from selective coding, from general coding to selective coding, where you systematically code with respect to your core concepts. Another aspect which is generally related with qualitative research is memoing. So memoing is a process where you record somebody's thoughts and ideas as a researcher. You must have seen when journalists, they report something or they go into field, they write down how people feel. No doubt they record also. They take videotapes also, because now technology has advanced also. But if you have to find out certain grounded things, you have to find out certain aspects which are very, very subjective in nature, which are not apparently available on the surface, and you want to go deep down inside the surface, then you maintain extensive marginal notes. If you have visited any medical college like PGI or AIMS or anybody, I don't remember the names outside the India, you must have seen that whosoever intern is working there, if a patient is designated to a particular intern, that intern keeps extensive notes about a patient, and they try to find out various causes of the ailment also. They try to take the historical backgrounds of the person also. They keep on recording the facts. They keep a copy maintained with them. Even if when the person gets fit, he comes out from that hospital and he visits that hospital after a year or two, they must have kept the records and they follow those records, because those historical evidences with that person's ill health are linked, and they keep on recording these facts until that person comes, goes visiting that particular medical college in the due times. So this is a very, very extensive process of writing notes and comments, and these memos, they are sometimes very open also, and they are total focus of core concepts. There can be certain integrative diagrams and sessions, like you must have heard about bibliometric techniques. You must have know about bibliometric mapping techniques, science mapping techniques. If you are into advanced research, there are certain visualization tools which are used to tell about a particular phenomena or a study. There can be integrative diagrams. There can be certain sessions which can be pulled up together in order to find out certain data. These diagrams can be of huge aspects, because it is generally said that when things cannot be put into words, it is good to show them with the help of visualization techniques. So visualization techniques are very much important. Many people are raising hands in between. I don't know, you have questions or you are just using your mobiles and it is getting maybe by chance, but my flow will be broken if I initiated a discussion. So let me finish off with my topic, and those who are raising hands again and again, I request you to have patience, because I know it's very complex. Maybe you are facing a lot of dilemma into your mind, but qualitative research is all about dilemmas, discussions, and it is all about dealing with humans. So a lot of questions are bound to happen. And I must tell you one thing also, you will never be satisfied with the answer of anybody, even if it's me, or even if it's a person who has established a theory in qualitative research, because human beings, they have always curiosity into their mind, and this type of research has no end, and there will be no satisfying answer, but still I will answer. So for my satisfaction. So there can be certain concepts, maps, directed graphs, even simple cartoons. If you see, those cartoons can be very, very important in order to visualize something, in order to convey something. These cartoons are very meaningful and they convey a lot of things. Eventually, when you talk about these approaches, they are very, very conceptually dense, and the core concepts of the categories, they are related with when this process will end. As I told you earlier also, when it ends, it is never ending process, and you have to decide that when it will end. As a researcher, you have to bound your limits yourself. Not your supervisor, not anybody else in the field will tell you that stop doing this research, or you will find any particular final result of that. Clearly, the process described above can happen indefinitely. Grounded theory has no clear demarcation. There is no ending theory. So essentially, the project ends when, as a researcher, you decide to quit. And the last section, I'll be winding up in 10 minutes, that what kind of qualitative data can be used for qualitative research. There are so many, but as a researcher, you will be encountered with various kinds of things. From where I can start is, just a moment. The qualitative data can be taken from in-depth interviews. So I'll not explain what are in-depth interviews, because it is evident from the name, where while you are doing interviews, you are totally focusing on group interviews or focus groups, and these data can be recorded in wide variety of ways. You can even take a help of steno, you can do audio recording, you can do video recording, you can have written notes. When you do in-depth interviews, they differ from direct observations. They are primarily done by interacting with others. In interviews, it is assumed that there is a questionnaire, and the person who is being interviewed has got certain time limit fixed, and you are trying to ask certain questions on a topic which you have initially told to that person. You try to probe the ideas of the interviewees about a phenomena or an interest. Sometimes you directly observe also. When you teach to a class, when the adults are there, okay, then at that time you can ask questions, but still you observe them, how they behave. But if you are teaching to a class maybe of small children, or you are talking about nursery school children, very, very young children, then you generally observe them, or patients, you observe them. If you start asking them questions, they'll feel irritated about that. So the sample defines that what kind of technique would you use. So sometimes you directly observe, and it is a very broad thing. It differs from interviewing. Observer is not actively querying the respondent. It can include anything from field research to living with that person, or staying in that culture, or even taking photographs of the phenomena, or just recording the phenomena and then observing at your home. So data can be recorded in many ways, with the help of steno, with the help of audio video techniques, with the help of pictures, photos, even drawings. Even these days people doodle also. And then written documents can be there. So many of you from social sciences must have used written documents, especially from the languages. They refer to existing documents, and they often transcribe people which are related with those documents if they are alive, and then they can conduct interviews. It can have a base from newspaper to magazine to a book or a website or a memo or annual report or anything. Usually whatever written documents are taken, they are being used for analyzing the content, and it's a very famous technique in qualitative research, doing content analysis. So there are certain methods which I am talking again, that is participant observation, I told you. Then there is direct observation. Direct observation is directly observing a typical person or become participant. Direct observer does strive to be very unobtrusive as well as possible, and you should not try to be biased while observing and reporting, and you should be very much detached from developing a perspective. Researcher is watching, rather than taking part in direct observation. When you are talking about the participant observation, you become participant of a team, of a group, of a team. But here you do not become part of a team. When you are talking about direct observation, then you are focusing on the person, how they are behaving, how they are reacting to a certain situation which is immersed in the content. And in direct observation, you generally try to not become participant, and you might try to observe a child mother interaction under specific circumstances, or you are trying to observe certain things in a laboratory behind a mirror, and you are not becoming part of that. You are taking even non-verbal cues in direct observation. Then there can be unstructured interviews also. Unstructured interviews where the questions are not structured. From question, a question may arise. You must have talked or thought about themes. You must have decided about what areas you are going to cover in a interview, but you have not decided about the list of questions. They are different from traditional structured interviews. One question leads to another. You try to probe. You must have seen people on the incident, right on the incident, the volunteers, they come up and they try to tell about you certain incident, and the reporter is reporting them live, and you try to ask them questions in relation to whatever happened. From one question another question leads, and so on. So researchers have got certain initial guiding questions in his mind, certain core concepts are there in his mind, but no formal structured instrument or protocol is there. Interviewer is totally free to move the conversation to any direction of interest which generally comes up while interacting with people. Moreover, unstructured interviewing is particularly useful for exploring a topic which is broader in its nature, and sometimes there is no structure of these things, and because of the interviews it is unique, and you try to find out the unique aspects of those interviews. Then we have case studies. A case study is an intensive. Please don't take case study to be a very light. I always tell my students that you do not think that doing a case study is a very easy job. It is the toughest task in qualitative research, because in case study you do not rely on one or two type of data. You have to rely maybe upon various types of data. In case study, it is not one tool which you have to use. Maybe you have to go for interview also, maybe you have to go for case structured questionnaire also, maybe sometimes you have to go for unstructured questionnaire also, maybe you go into a panel discussion, maybe you go into any other kind of discussion from where you try to gather the data. So it is the combination of various techniques. It is not so easy to do a case study. It is an intensive study of a specific individual or a specific constant. And Freud, he developed case studies on various individuals as the basis of theory of psychoanalysis, and Paget did case studies of children to study the developmental phases of the children. So there is no single way to do a case study. You can use various tools, as I told you. And other ways of doing a case study can be one-to-one interview. Conducting in-depth interview with one person most extensively is the most common method of doing qualitative research. In personal interview, you try to have a one respondent at one time, and you have framed your questions right before the interview. This is purely a conversational method, and you try to find out certain opportunities to get the details from your subject in depth. And the advantage of this method is you try to find out great opportunity to gather precise data, that what people believe and what are the motivations. If the researcher is well experienced, then you can obviously ask right questions at right time, and you can get meaningful data. But if you are naive, you have not thought about it earlier, then you may go back home and feel bad about, I forgot to ask this question, and I should have asked that question, and then you cannot do anything else, because every time your subject is not available for answering your question, and then you are calling your subject again. Sir, I forgot to ask you one question. Can you answer it now? Maybe if he is kind enough, he gives you answer once or twice. At third time, he will block you from WhatsApp and your call also, that this person is troubling me. So you have to refrain from such activities. So these interviews are generally performed face-to-face on phone, or maybe it can be in the field also, depending upon the opportunity, depending upon the convenience. But it is generally said that body language plays an important role. So it is always best to have a face-to-face interview. But still, in this era of digitalization, we feel it convenient to meet virtually, to talk virtually, to have a phone call, to have a video call, rather than to visit that person's residence or something like that. Then we can have focus groups. A focus group is again very extensively used technique, a group which generally contains respondents varying from 6 to 10 and which have got a similar kind of a thing. You focus to find out certain answers, why, what, and how questions are generally asked, and you not necessarily interact with the group in person to person. You try to focus on that what group thinks about a particular phenomenon. Generally, focus groups are used by marketers these days to do online surveys on their various devices, and the responses can be collected by the click of buttons. Focus groups is a very expensive method these days because digital methods or softwares or these things are very costly. Typically, complex processes are solved. Business organizations, governments, they use these methods, and they generally do it to find out certain market researches. And ethnography, we have talked about it. I'll not go into it again. It is the most in-depth observational method where you try to live in the natural occurring environment in which you have to adapt to the target audience's environment, which could be anywhere. And here geographical constraints can be issues. So these are the things. And last is case study, which we have already discussed. And last but not the least, which is the most traditional way, that is record keeping. And this method is generally used by all of us. You always try to keep record of reliable documents, sources which are data source, and this data can be used in a new research. This is similar to going into a library, and you can have books and reference materials and collect relevant data that can be likely used into the research. That was all about the qualitative research, its dimensions, its types and theories. I can see the second resource person has already joined. I don't know whether the interaction can be there or not. So Kanupriya, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. That was very informative, very elaborate, and the importance of qualitative research in a world, in an era where more focus is towards quantitative research, because scholars like us who specifically belong from the domain of humanities, we actually know like equal kind of efforts are put for towards the qualitative research also. And ma'am, you have very elaboratively you have described what all efforts, what are the parameters which are taken into consideration while undergoing a qualitative research. So thank you so very much, ma'am. And participants, I request you to please hold on with your questions. We'll take up all your questions towards the end of the second session as well. And now I would like to welcome our
So do I have to join after ma'am's lecture, Dr. Kashmiria's lecture?
Ma'am, however you feel like around 8 we'll be done with the second session also, and then we'll take up the questions, the queries from all the participants.
Okay, right. So I'll take a break and then I'll join later, so that the other resource person is also convenient in the lecture.
Sure, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Thank you
It's
so much,
good to see you after a long time. I don't know whether you remember me or not, but I remember you.
It's a kind of Himachal association which I can see over here today. So good to see everyone.